Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. The debate over the increasing corporatization of media and its control over it has been going on across the world for some years now. In the United States, it is said that 6 major corporates control almost 90% of the media despite some restrictions. The mergers and acquisitions through which this has happened in US and other countries has now become a trend in India also, causing serious concern. The corporate control over the media has consequently increased in India too. While the debate how to control the corporatization has been witnessed in this country also for some time, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India has come out with a consultation paper on the issue and is now on the verge of coming out with recommendations to regulate corporate control. The TRI seeks to separate corporate ownership of media from editorial management, a job easier said than done, certainly. Today, we will look at issues related to the corporate ownership and media, its benefits and ill effects, and how it can be regulated. To discuss this, I have with me KVL Narayan, President of the News Broadcasters Association and also Executive Chairperson of the NDTV Group, Bhatruhari Mahtab, BJD MP in Lok Sabha, who also runs the Oriya newspaper Prajatantra, Neelabh Mishra, editor of the Hindi Outlook, and Vipul Mudgal, a veteran journalist who was the former resident editor of Hindustan Times. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Narayan, I would like to come to you first. You know, in the last several months, there has been a lot of discussion. In fact, the Standing Committee of the Parliament has also come out with a report on paid news, but it has also dealt with the issues of ownership and things like that. Now the TRI has come out with this consultation paper, and I suppose they had also held an open house session in which I suppose some of you also were there. Now they are talking about coming out with some recommendations on regulating corporate control. Do you think that this is necessary?
Well, first of all, good evening.
Good evening.
You know, what TRI has issued is a consultation paper.
Right.
And at the moment, the entire issue is under discussion. There's some revelation of the mind of Dr. Kuller and the rest of TRI.
Right.
As to what the entire matter and issue is all about. The basic thing is that, Dr. Kuller is a very experienced civil servant and has a huge background in dealing with issues like this. I'm sure he would have considered things like the fact that there are 80,000 newspapers in the country today.
Right.
Over about 750 channels.
Right.
So the whole point about corporate ownership is about that there should be plurality. And the fact is there is plurality that already exists. I'm sure all of that will be considered when any kind of recommendations come out.
So you're not committing yourself either way, whether you think that this is necessary or not.
You know, I honestly believe that self-regulation is the best kind of regulation, and it's difficult to impose anything on a vast media in a vast country like ours. But that being said, there are certain steps that sometimes are necessary. I think what TRI is trying to do is to frame the basic fundamental guidelines.
Right.
They're not saying that government will control. They're just saying that these are the conditions under which people will operate. Broadly, that should be okay as long as they don't curb, a media organization's right to expand and grow.
Okay, I'll come back to Mr. Mahtab. You have also been running a media house, maybe not in the size of what Mr. Narayan Rao runs, but you think that this is an issue for which the time has come now about to bring in some regulations?
Yes, Mr. Nikam, I believe that with the expansion of and integration of different types of media, the cross media ownership
Right.
is taking a new turn.
Right.
That was non-existent earlier.
Right.
When our newspaper started in 1923, that was something of history today. And today, with this cross-media ownership, be it radio, be it broadcasting, be it print media, be it the new media that is in prevalent today.
And radio also.
Yes, that broadcasting covers
Both print and television. Both, yeah.
television and radio.
Radio, okay.
Print media is one, and new media
Right.
with the internet and other aspect. So this is taking a new turn, and unless India comes out with a new regulatory mechanism, the ownership is going to, the monopolistic and restrictive act that is prevalent today in the country does not have the provisions to control or to regulate the monopolistic attitude. If I compare India's situation with other developed countries, be it USA, be it Germany, Australia, even South Africa or Brazil, they have a restrictive policy relating to ownership. I am not in favor of controlling the content of what is being broadcast or what is being printed. That is enshrined in our constitution. It is freedom of speech. In that respect, that should be left out. But ownership needs to be regulated.
Okay. That's a very straightforward answer, I think. Vipul, one of the things which the TRI is talking about is dividing ownership and the editorial management. Is this something which is in the realm of possibility?
It is in the realm of possibility, but you see, the situation is very clear. The management runs the organization. They hold the purse strings. They are the ones who decide the policies of the newspapers, and they are also the ones who appoint the editorial staff. So,
right.
I mean, to say that they will have full freedom to do whatever they want in spite of the management.
No, this is talking. No, they are trying. I think what they are trying to do, the TRI is trying to do, is to differentiate between corporate ownership and owners. I don't know. I mean, is there a they're talking about that they can have shares in this thing, and but they can't have any editorial control or management.
No, the cross-media ownership controls is a good idea.
Yes.
I think many countries in the world do it because, as you said in the beginning of the program, that the ownership of media is being concentrated in lesser and lesser hands.
Absolutely.
If that happens, that can you imagine if 5 people control entire Indian media, then probably in one drawing room you can decide what is going to be the country's policy vis-a-vis corruption or mining.
We are almost getting there.
Yeah. So my point is that look at the media carefully. There is a crisis going on, and the crisis manifests itself in the form of paid news, in the form of motivated news, in the form that the poor and the marginalized are being completely left out of the media dialogue that India conducts. So now in a situation like this, you have the leisure taking the front seat, you have the lifestyle, you have entertainment, and at the cost of what? At the cost of real news.
Right.
So I would say that TRI as a technical body which controls the airwaves can exist, but what you need is a regulatory body like a Media Council of India, bigger version of Press Council of India with some real teeth, where they can actually punish. And once again, we have seen in the case of Lokpal debate, etc., that the key is in the appointment.
Absolutely.
If the Prime Minister is there, the leader of the opposition is there, Lok Sabha Speaker is there, Chief Justice is there, and perhaps you have, I'm just thinking aloud, but you can have a body of citizens to think about it, not a government control, but a democratically kind of conceived Media Council of India probably can do a better job.
Okay. Neelabh, when in fact in the consultation paper which TRI has come out with, it even talks about a link between the uncontrolled ownership and paid news and things like that. Do you think that, and political lobbying, all these things that they say there is a link about, do you see that link?
Well, I think corporate control, there are two aspects to it. One is direct control as ownership, stakes, the other is control through advertisers. Now that is a bigger control which they exercise, because we have all seen as editors, there are conditions from advertisers like, is the news going to be positive or negative, what kind of thing is happening, or what is on the cover, is it a positive cover or a negative cover, a soft cover or a hard cover, say for instance for a magazine, these, and the placement of the ads. And there are, many such things which through advertising agencies and very insidiously they sometimes, you know, and through the marketing department of the organizations, these things are imposed. Now,
these are things which TRAI can do hardly anything about.
yes, they can do hardly anything about, but there I agree with Vipul that some sort of a citizens media watchdog, you know, it's their function, it's not the function of the government to regulate that. I've always maintained, I mean even before this corporatization started, that press freedom in India, freedom of speech in India is there, but you know, as a practitioner, as a good editor, you have to maneuver your way around it.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's, and
I
that
suppose
maneuvering space for editors is getting less and less.
And less. You know, I you know, this one thing which comes in my mind is that always in this country, media has been controlled by industrialists, jute press and all these things, but there was more freedom for the professional editor and the professional journalist, which is now getting more and more reduced.
If you look at it from the angle of the economics of media, you know, there are these two contradictory pulls. One is that increasingly because of the cost of production, especially with respect to the electronic media and also in print to an extent, you need, you know, I mean there is this tendency towards convergence.
Right.
You know, so one newsroom catering to maybe a TV, catering to net, catering to a magazine, and this has inherent monopolistic tendencies in itself.
Absolutely.
And the other is, you know, because these enterprises are loss making at times, especially in periods of slump, what you notice is, I mean, you want to get into the owners, if you look at it from their perspective, they want to get into economy of scale.
Exactly.
You know, but then economy of scale, then finally it starts affecting
the plurality.
It makes it, yeah, homogeneous. It makes
Absolutely.
media homogeneous. So you have to find a way, and I think it's very hard thinking which is required here as to how you balance these two things.
Okay, Mr. Rao, do you think that, you know, this corporatization is something? I'm sure when your company started, when NDTV started, there was less corporatization of the media. Now it has increased quite a bit. Your company, I'm sure, is also part of this whole process. You know, when you started your company and now, do you see a difference in the way it functions? Do you see a difference in the bottom line? Do you see a difference in how editorial content gets played up? Mr. Rao?
I'm sorry, I seem to have lost your voice.
Okay, Mr. Rao.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, Mr.
I can
Rao.
hear you now.
Yeah, Mr. Rao, what I was saying is when the corporatization process which has been happening in this country for the last maybe a decade or so, before that, your company has been in existence much before that. You were not, you were gradually also become part of the corporatization process. So do you think that the editorial content has been different from the days when there was not much corporatization and now?
You know, NDTV was a company 25 years ago, and it's a company today.
Absolutely.
So to say that what I did 25 years ago was different from what I do today is not exactly correct. All I've done actually is to ensure that I've improved my editorial standards. I've ensured that there's a Chinese wall between the editorial and the commercial. While being a corporate entity, please remember that I'm subject to all the corporate laws of this land. That includes corporate governance of the highest standard, disclosures of the highest standard. I'm a listed company. I'm in the public eye and a public scrutiny constantly. So there are plenty of checks and balances that are taking place, both on my corporate structure and management style, as also in my editorial policy and the way our editors and journalists function. The fact is, I don't think there's anybody who can say today that the journalists, you know, are subject to any kind of pressure or scrutiny that takes away from their journalistic freedom or ability to function as independent journalists.
But Mr. Rao, do you agree that, you know, Maybe NDTV is an exception, but there are, these concerns are not just concerns which have come out of thin air. You agree that, there has been a lot of concerns expressed about this, because there have been real occasions, real situations where whatever concerns the TRI consultation paper is expressing about control of the media, lobbying and pressures and vested interests. These are all issues which are real issues. Do you agree with it or not?
No, I agree with a large part of what is being said. For example, a political party should not be owning media at all. There's a direct conflict of interest.
Right.
You can't belong to one of the three pillars of democracy and also the fourth one. I mean, you have to be, if the executive, legislature and judiciary is meant to be independent of each other, then the media is meant to be independent of all three of them. And the fact is that if there is that kind of a conflict of interest, it has to be curbed. I completely accept that.
But what about major corporate houses who have had nothing to do with the media, now getting into the media and investing hugely into it, and these mergers and acquisitions which are taking place? Don't you think that reduces the plurality of the media?
I think what is important to ensure is that whatever editorial, whatever comes out by way of news programming or by news stories and articles are independent, are done independently, and are in the larger performance of a public service, which means they inform, they educate, they do it independently, independent of government and independent of revenue considerations. And the currency of good news journalism is always going to be credibility.
Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. But how easy is that? What you have said, isn't it? It's easier said than done, than from what we have been witnessing in the recent past.
No, there have been aberrations. I don't dispute that. But the fact is that in the long term, I mean, for hundreds of years, journalism has existed, and it has existed only because it has been credible. Ultimately, the power is in the hands of the reader or the viewer. If he doesn't like you or he thinks that you're not being credible, he can switch you off. There may be temporary gains by this or that style of journalism, but eventually you have to be credible.
Okay, Mr. Mahtab, do you agree with Mr. Narayan Rao's points? Do you think that good journalism will always prevail? Have we seen that happening? And this corporatization, how much, once the big corporates enter into the field, which they have already, do you think they'll be able to restrict themselves, resist the temptation to control?
My first question would be, why would corporate sector enter into a media line?
Absolutely. They come for profits.
Corporate sector always invests for a profit,
Right.
for business.
Right.
What type of business will accrue if they invest in media line? I fail to understand. They are not in media line to do public service. They are not in media line, investing in media line to do public good. I don't know how they will be explaining their investment to their shareholders. But as far as everybody knows, whenever a corporate house invests or takes certain amount of share of certain companies, they expect that media house to give them certain benefit in a different way.
Right.
In that respect, I would say we have witnessed in our country, there are corporate houses who have invested in different type of media in India,
Right.
and those medias have been very lenient to those corporate houses. Relative to the other aspect which Mr. Rao had just mentioned, that
Right.
political parties or politicians should not involve themselves in media, that has not been a practice in our country. Even during the freedom struggle, eminent freedom fighters were editing newspapers. They were talking to the people through their columns, through their write-ups, through the newspaper they were editing. Even after we gained independence, newspapers have been published by political parties and political leaders. Even today, number of news channels are being run by different political parties, be it
Right.
CPM or DMK or whatever.
Yes.
But I would say,
And BJD
as,
also.
BJD to certain extent, yes, yes, and so also Akali Dal, so also different other political parties, yes. But I would say here that the remote is with the viewer. He can switch it off, he or she can switch it off whenever the program is not to his or her liking. But the question lies here, they modulate public opinion. It is through TV channel, it is through newspaper, it is through media. The nation talks to itself, as Arthur Miller had said long back.
Yes.
So if the media is talking to if the nation is talking to itself through the media, who is regulating that media? That is the question which
Who is
that is
controlling
the question which we should be asking ourselves.
Yes.
Therefore, I believe the content should not be regulated. But as far as I know, because I have been running a newspaper for last more than 30 years, directly involved in a newspaper management and also editing a newspaper, I know finance is a constraint, and finance at times also restricts your view to express yourself.
Absolutely. Mr. Rao, very quick reaction if you want to react on what Mr. Narayan, Mr. Mahtab said about why should corporates invest in media if not for profit?
You know, what you have to understand is that if it's not going to be government which owns, it has to be a corporate organization which owns the media. I mean, it's as simple as that. Even the guidelines for uplinking from India speak of, you know, a license only being given to a company. And every company then becomes part of a corporate entity.
Okay.
So the fact is that corporate, sector will own the media. The point is, how do they run the media? And the point is, what kind of a media product do they come out with? And if it's a credible media product that endures all kinds of criticism and is able to get the viewership and popularity that a good journalism demands, it will get it.
Okay. Vipul, what kind of people should enter media? I mean, this is one of the questions raised by in the consultation paper of TRI. You know, what kind of people should be given permission or license to run a media? There are arguments that, you know, it's unconstitutional against Article 19 and several other articles and things like that. But that question has become a quick question today.
No, it's a very deep question. You see, what you're asking is whether media should be treated as a profession
because,
or not.
you know, I am asking this in the context of what Mr. Narayan Rao said. Mr. Narayan Rao's company, they're all professional journalists who have been managing it and who have been running it and things like that. But now we are seeing a different trend altogether.
No. Reacting to what Mr. Narayan Rao said, I would say something else.
Yes.
It's not a question of leaving everything to the media and then letting them run it professionally the way they like. No, that's not the idea at all. We've seen in two very good judgments, one in 1995, Cricket Association of Bengal judgment, and second was the 2G judgment of 2012, in which the Supreme Court very clearly said that airwaves are a public good.
Absolutely.
And the value of airwaves should be decided not on the basis of the market value,
Right.
but on the basis of the social value.
Yes.
So there is a social value.
And monopoly
culture,
over broadcasting. It
and
said that monopoly over broadcasting is inconsistent with free speech.
Absolutely. And that is why you should have community media, you should have public service broadcasting media. And there should be all kinds of policies. I mean, you can't just give it openly to the market and say that the market will decide. I can understand Mr. Narayan Rao being a smart manager who would give value to the owners, who will give value to the shareholders, perfectly fine. I mean, we need good people like that. But at the same time, media can't be left to the wolves like that. And the question that you were asking is that, yes, there is a possibility of having some kind of a professional body. Like, to be a doctor, you need a degree, number one. And second, a medical council which can allow you or disallow you from functioning as a doctor. So in the same way, if the journalists can be stopped from their trade, like Bar Council can stop a lawyer, at least in theory, if there is a media council which can stop you or allow you from practicing journalism, if you are indulging in blackmail, etc., yes, that possibility exists, but it can't be taken too far.
But finally, Neelabh, you know, there is also this thing that when you start talking of regulating and corporate control over the media and things like that, it should not end up being a proxy of the state. You know, it should not become state controlled. It should not become a proxy. So that fear is also there. What is the real challenge before the try now when it comes out with its recommendations is how it balances all these things, right?
Yes, I mean, but I think the bogey of state control now lies buried in India after 2 or 3 fiascos. One was the emergency, the other was the Bihar press bill, then came the defamation bill of Rajiv Gandhi, all met with a similar fate. But yes, I mean, there are insidious ways. Now, how does the state control media these days? It's in a nexus. It's in a nexus with corporate
the media
entities,
itself.
with the media itself.
And with the owners,
Yeah,
the
so
corporates.
now you have to have bodies which would ensure breaking of any nexuses, which would watch these nexuses, nexus between lobbyists and government, between corporates and government, between individual rogue elements in all these sectors,
Yes.
Even individual rogue journalists,
Absolutely.
for that matter. So you have to have some kind of monitoring there. And then you have to have laws, laws which the state should also follow,
Absolutely.
and laws which all practitioners in the field, all the players follow. I mean, you have to have these neutral, institutionalized laws which cannot easily be subverted, as happens in mature democracies.
Absolutely. I think on that note, we have to end. These institutional structures need to be created. That's what TRI is also talking about. But TRI is also talking about, differentiating between corporate ownership and editorial management, which is, as I said right at the beginning, is something which is easier said than done. But today, from today's discussion, it's obvious that majority at least feel that there needs to be some regulation, but how and what kind, we will wait and watch how it will all emerge in the coming days. Thanks to all my guests, Mr. KVL Narayan Rao, Mr. Bhatruhari Mahtab, Vipul Mudgal and Neelabh Mishra. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on The Big Picture, same time tomorrow.